So in the Week 7 forum, we are going to discuss personal bias. What is personal bias? Personal bias refers to the tendency of individuals to favor certain perspectives, beliefs, or opinions over others, which can influence their judgment and decision-making. Personal bias arises from various factors, such as personal experiences, cultural background, upbringing, education, and social influences. Personal bias can manifest itself in many forms, including confirmation bias, favoring information that confirms existing beliefs, availability bias, relying on readily available information without checking other sources, or implicit bias, unconscious bias based on stereotypes. Whether bias is considered good or bad depends on the context and its impact on decision-making and fairness. Here are a few points to consider. Good bias. In some cases, bias can have positive implications. For example, personal bias can lead to passionate advocacy for a cause or motivate someone to take action against injustice. Bias can also foster creativity by encouraging unique perspectives and ideas that challenge the status quo. Bad bias. Bias becomes problematic when it distorts reasoning, impairs objectivity, or perpetuates discrimination. In fields such as journalism, research, or decision-making processes, an excessive personal bias can compromise accuracy, fairness, and integrity of the work. It can lead to unfair treatment, discrimination, or exclusion of certain individuals or groups based on irrelevant factors. It is important to distinguish between personal bias and critical thinking. Critical thinking involves evaluating information objectively, considering multiple perspectives, and being open to revising one's views based on evidence, while bias is an inherent part of human cognition. Being aware of our biases and actively working to mitigate their impact is crucial for making informed decisions and promoting fairness. Personal bias and writing. Personal bias in writing can have a significant impact on how information is presented and perceived by the reader. Here are some effects of personal bias in writing. Distorted presentation and information. Personal bias can lead to a distorted presentation of information. Writers may consciously or unconsciously emphasize certain facts or interpretations that align with their own beliefs, while downplaying or omitting contradictory evidence. This can result in an unbalanced representation of the topic, potentially misleading readers and affecting their understanding of the subject matter. Undermine credibility. When personal bias is evident in writing, it can undermine the writer's credibility. Readers may perceive the writer as lacking objectivity or suspect their motives. Bias can create doubt about the accuracy and reliability of the information presented, diminishing the impact and persuasiveness of the writing. Reinforcement of confirmation bias. Confirmation bias refers to the tendency to seek and interpret information in a way that confirms pre-existing beliefs. When writers succumb to personal bias, they may unintentionally reinforce confirmation bias in their readers. This can perpetuate existing beliefs, limit critical thinking, and hinder the exploration of alternative perspectives. Polarization and divisiveness. Personal bias can contribute to polarization and divisiveness in writing. If writers strongly align with a particular viewpoint and express it without considering opposing arguments, this can create an us versus them mentality and discourage constructive dialogue. This can further fuel conflict and hinder productive engagement on the topic. And to me, social media and certain television broadcasts motivate or encourage divisiveness for ratings. Impaired audience reception. Personal bias can impact how the audience receives and interprets the writing. Readers who share the same bias may be more likely to accept and embrace the information, while those who hold different perspectives may dismiss or reject it outright. This can limit the effectiveness of reaching a diverse audience and fostering meaningful discussion. To mitigate the effects of personal bias, it is important for writers to engage in self-reflection, practice empathy, and strive for objectivity. So in the Week 7 forum, students are going to engage in self-reflection and try to come up with what personal biases that you have, and then come up with ways to mitigate that personal bias so that you make sure that you always are open to different perspectives and practice empathy and strive for objectivity. By recognizing and acknowledging personal biases, writers can make a conscious effort to present information fairly, consider multiple viewpoints, provide evidence-based arguments, and foster a more inclusive and informed conversation. What personal bias should you avoid? There are various personal biases that you need to avoid. So as I mentioned earlier, confirmation bias is so common in social media. For instance, Facebook had algorithms that targeted, let's say, Democrats, so that they would only put pro-Democrat stuff in your newsfeed if you click on a lot of Democrat, like you like a lot of Democrat memes. The opposite is true. So then that's why confirmation bias refers, and especially in social media, where you would unfriend people who are of opposite political views of you, or going to Thanksgiving and some family member talks about an opposite point of view and you defriend or argue with that person. So confirmation bias refers to the tendency to only hang out with people who are of the same opinion as you, in which you just want to confirm your pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses, and you ignore or dismiss other people's points of view, especially if they don't agree with you. So that's confirmation bias, means you dismiss contradictory evidence. You want to avoid confirmation bias. You want to leave yourself open to all points of view and alternative points of view. And so to avoid confirmation bias, writers should actively seek out and consider diverse perspectives, challenging their own assumptions and critically evaluating all available evidence. Political bias. Political bias occurs when a writer's political beliefs or affiliations influence their presentation or information or arguments. Yeah, think CNN and Fox News. Yeah, that's so much political bias. Writers should make an effort to separate their personal political views from their writing, ensuring that they provide a balanced analysis of the topic and consider a wide range of political perspectives. And so in your argumentative essay, you are going to avoid bias by having a good counter-argument and rebuttal paragraph. Cultural bias. Cultural bias can arise when a writer's cultural background, experiences, or beliefs influence their portrayal of certain groups or topics. It is important to recognize and challenge cultural biases to ensure fair and accurate representation. Writers should strive to be culturally sensitive, avoid stereotypes, and present information in a manner that respects diverse cultures and perspectives. Cultural bias occurs in how we present topics. Most topics in the United States, such as when they teach American history, has a cultural bias towards European or Eurocentric type topics. So in order to be more open to other cultures, now they're opening up the history to Asian Americans, African Americans, and when you open up your presentation to diverse perspectives, that's how you mitigate bias. Availability bias refers to the tendency to rely on readily available examples or information that come to mind easily, rather than seeking out a comprehensive range of evidence. Oh, this is most evident in social media, where people just read one article and then assume that article is true without looking it up to verify if that article is true. And so as a reader, you should make a conscious effort after you read something on social media, is that you gather information from diverse sources and consider a broad spectrum of evidence to avoid availability bias. So don't just instantly share what you read. You've got to go make sure that what you read on social media is true before you share that article to your friends. Otherwise, if you just simply share without checking it out first, then you are doing this whole availability bias, and you're just spreading rumors and gossip to your friends. So you want to mitigate bias by always checking up. Don't just read one source, but read multiple sources from multiple points of view in order to get the wide picture of that topic. So that's one way to mitigate availability bias. Don't believe everything you read on social media. Implicit bias. Implicit bias are unconscious attitudes or stereotypes that influence our understanding, actions, and decisions. Writers should reflect on their own implicit bias and be vigilant in challenging and minimizing their impact on their writing. So in the Week 7 forum, we are going to discuss what are your implicit biases, what unconscious attitudes or stereotypes influence your understanding of the world, and how do these implicit biases or unconscious attitudes influence your presentation of your writing and your work. And so in order to avoid implicit bias, writers should reflect, this is what I just said already, you need to consider multiple perspectives and avoid assumptions based on implicit bias. In this way, when you look at a wide range of perspectives, that's how you promote fairness and inclusivity. So it is essential for writers to examine their own biases, engage in self-reflection, and actively work toward presenting information in a fair, objective, and inclusive manner. By acknowledging and consciously avoiding personal biases, writers can enhance the credibility, impact, and integrity of their writing. Why is it important to have objective, bias-free writing? And so, accuracy and credibility. Objective writing aims to present information in a fair and balanced manner, free from personal biases or subjective opinions, by striving for objectivity. So you use third-person case. You don't say I, or you. You use only he, she, and they. So that is the third-person case is the objectivity. So if your essay is objective, you can ensure the accuracy of your work. This in turn enhances the trustworthiness of the information presented and allows readers to make well-informed decisions based on reliable sources. That's another thing. When you make a claim in your paper, you must have credible sources. Because if you don't have credible sources, you might as well be writing a propaganda or rumors. So always have credible or reliable sources. Use CAPAO, currency. A stands for author, P stands for purpose, the O in CAPAO stands for objectivity, W stands for writing style, and then if possible use Google Scholar, because Google Scholar and your LAPU online library has credible sources, and use peer-reviewed sources. They are the most reliable sources you can use in your paper, and also strive to include your counter-argument and your rebuttal paragraphs. And if you look over my Week 5 forum presentation, I will show you how you do that, how you put in or insert the counter-argument and rebuttal paragraphs so that you have objective, bias-free writing. And so if you have objective writing, you have impartiality and fairness. Objective writing promotes impartiality and fairness by providing an equal treatment of different perspectives, viewpoints, and arguments. It allows readers to form their own opinions based on a comprehensive understanding of all sides of an issue. This fosters a more inclusive and respectful dialogue, encouraging constructive discussion and an exploration of diverse ideas. So if you want to get your news from an objective source, go to allsides.com. That's a great place to find your news. Critical thinking and engagement. Objective writing stimulates critical thinking in writers. When presented with balanced information, readers are more likely to engage critically, evaluate information, and consider alternative viewpoints. Objective writing challenges readers to question their own assumptions, assess the strength of arguments, and develop well-rounded perspectives on complex issues. So that's what you're doing in the Week 7 forum. You are questioning your assumptions. You're assessing the strength of your arguments. You're becoming aware of your personal biases and then finding a way to get rid of or mitigate those biases. So bias-free writing helps us to avoid manipulation and misinformation, and helps to prevent the spread of misinformation. By presenting facts objectively and clearly distinguishing them from facts, writers reduce the risk of distorting or misrepresenting information to fit a particular narrative or agenda. This is especially true in the age of information overload and the proliferation of fake news and propaganda. Objective writing also promotes inclusivity and respect for diversity, and by respecting and valuing diverse perspectives, experiences, and identities. So objective writing avoids reinforcing stereotypes or discrimination. By striving for objectivity, writers contribute to a more inclusive society that embraces everyone. Objective writing is a hallmark of professionalism and upholds ethical standards, including in many fields, including journalism, academia, research, and many other domains. Objective writing demonstrates a commitment to accuracy and fairness in the presentation of information. And so, questions to answer for the Week 7 forum. What personal biases do you have? How can you mitigate your personal biases? Have you ever been a victim of someone else's personal biases? For instance, did people make fun of you because you had a tattoo? Or did people discriminate against you because you have an afro? Or you didn't get hired for a job because of that afro? Or having hair that's too curly? Or being too fat for a front office position? Or being deemed too old for the job? Or not getting an apartment, house, or job because of your skin color, gender, or sexual orientation? How can you be aware of your biases? How can you help avoid personal biases and help you avoid hurting other people with your biases? So these are the questions that you are going to consider as you answer your posts, as you make your first initial posts for the Week 7 forum. You have a choice to answer any of these questions for your initial post for your Week 7 forum. So we only have one more week left to go in this class. So it has been a really fast ride through English 105. So I hope that you have enjoyed these last 7 forums. Next week, the Week 8 forum, you're just going to reflect on what you've learned in English 105. So this will be the last of my forum videos. And so for the Week 8 forum, reflect on what important life lessons have you learned in English 105, and how has English 105 changed your life, and how can you apply what you've learned to the real world or to your writing. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me anytime.